Okay. All right. Welcome, everybody. Have a wonderful afternoon. We are studying Kitzur Shulchan Aruch, the abridged code of Jewish law, chapter 98, and we're up to 21, Chof Aleph. Okay, so we're continuing the different types of things that we're allowed to do on Yom Tov for food preparation, right? Because as we said, in concept, any malacha, any creative activity that we can't do on Shabbos, we also can't do it on Yom Tov. And the exception is for food preparation. And we're going through what fits into that exception and what doesn't fit into that exception. So, Chaf Aleph, number 21, Hashoichet Behema b'Yom Tov. If you shecht, you slaughter an animal on Yom Tov. Right? I'm sure most of you are going to do that this Yom Tov. Right? But, again, remember pre-refrigeration. 2 days Yom Tov, especially was 2 days Yom Tov followed by a Shabbos or following a Shabbos. It was necessary to shech for fresh meat. Now, he's giving us some good advice rather than a halacha. It's good, in other words, it's a smart thing to do, not to examine the lungs until after you have skinned the animal. Why? Because if you're going to examine the animal's lungs and find out that it's a treifa, has some type of lung disease or had some type of lung disease, some type of inner problem with its inner organs, that it's not going to survive for 12 months, also lafshita. Now you can't skin it anymore. The meat becomes muksa, and there's nothing you can do. And then not only is the meat going to go to waste, but the hide is going to go to waste. So if we skin it first, then we put the skin, we're going to see in a minute what we can do with it, then we haven't lost the hide. We haven't lost the hide if we find that afterwards it was a treifa. So today they, again after shchita, they check the in a pasta, check the lungs. The lungs are the biggest problem. The lungs and the intestines nowadays, because at least in America, a lot of the animals end up eating nails and all kinds of things that are left around the knobs of barbed wire. Things are left around the farms, and if this pierces certain places in the stomach, then that also can make a treifa. But when they were more sort of free roaming, healthier, the biggest issue with it was the lungs. Okay, so we skin it before we check the lungs. Now, even though the skin, the hide, I mean, in a certain respect, it's muksa, because what are you going to do with hide? It's not tanned. It doesn't really have a purpose. But once you've skinned it, you're allowed to move it in order to put it away somewhere safe, protected. Below the shachta, I'll go you say, sorry, the shachta. Yeah.
Are you talking about chicken hide?
No. Cow, sheep.
Oh, okay.
Okay. So I'll go you say this. You can't spread it on posts. So this is, I guess, the first step. Shar oiris asurim betiltul. Any other hide, so if you shecht before Yom Tov, any other hide that's not yet fully tanned, so it doesn't have any purpose yet, you can't handle on Yom Tov. And now we're going to get to the chickens for your question. Sorry?
They call it a helzu.
That's
when
it.
When you fill the hide of the chicken, the skin of the chicken, when you fill it up, it had the skin from the neck. So They call the whole thing a helzu. Helzu is a neck.
Yeah. Okay.
So before you get to chickens, let's stay with the cow for the moment. What about the gid nefesh and the
gid nefesh? So the things that you cut out, you can cut them all out. So we're going to see that this is the next number 22. We're going to see what we can do to the meat. Yeah. Okay. So we're going to get to that. Yes.
What about when you're cutting the samana, when you're actually shechting the animal, and it becomes treif, can you still use the hide if it's not cut properly by a?
Oh, I'm saying if you messed up at the actual shchita.
Yes, right.
Yeah. So samana, then no. Yeah. So then already the whole animal's muksa. Mm-hmm. So then we're allowed to move the whole carcass somewhere to keep it safe if there's not anywhere to put it, but we can't skin it. Right. So the same thing applies to the feathers, right, from the bird that you shechted that day. Well, you're allowed to handle them to put them away somewhere, right? Because we have to feather it by hand and or defeather it, we should say, by hand. And those feathers were used, right? They went to pillows and blankets and, all these kinds of things. So you can allow to put them away somewhere. But other feathers, also the taltalim, they're muksa. We can't move them. Okay, so 22. So now we're going to speak about the preparation of the meat. You're allowed to salt the meat to remove its blood. Right, because in a certain respect, salting is like a offshoot of tanning, right? Because anything that the salting, the processes. So just to give a bit of a rundown, while we're at it, just a bit of background. So there's different types of blood that are in the animal. Right now, I mean, when I say different types, it's all the same blood, but there's different prohibitions. So there's the blood that is literally, it's called like the life blood. In other words, when you shech the animal, the amount of blood that spurts out, and now the animal can't live anymore. So that is the most serious prohibition, but because we have prohibition of consuming blood. So that's level 1. Level 2 is the blood that sort of oozes out afterwards, and the blood in the major arteries and various things take out. Then we have the blood that's in the meat itself. So in theory, and I'm emphasizing in theory, and I'll tell you why not in practice. In theory, the blood that's in its natural place, so not in the big blood vessels, just in the meat. So if that blood is not moved, right, it stays in its place, you could eat it. Now, what I say in theory, because in practice, first of all, if you cook it, the blood moves around. As you're cooking, the heat moves the blood around. We see the moisture comes out of the meat, or whatever it is. So cooking's an issue. Next one is pressure, right? So if you would have to have the sharpest knife on earth really to slice through the meat so it doesn't press down to move that blood around. And then I guess you'd have to then, with that, cut into small enough piece that you could swallow it whole, because when you chew it, that would move the blood around. So I guess in theory, if you had some samurai sword that you can chop up the meat into little sushi pieces without applying any pressure, just to the sharpness of the knife, and you're happy to swallow the raw meat whole, then you don't have to salt the meat. Right? That you can have the, but I see no one was getting excited by that recipe. So if we're going to cook the meat, then we have to remove the blood because it's going to move around in the cooking process. So what we do is we put salt, thick salt. So often there's certain companies, they sell salt called kosher salt. Now, usually it's actually not thick enough. They've actually, they're just taking liberty by calling it kosher salt. But the kashering salt's actually more coarse than that. And that draws out the blood. So if you've ever salted, you'll see the salt becomes reddish, pinkish. And it has to be, you have to have it on a surface that the blood can drain. So, look, in the commercial places, they have a whole, special equipment. If you're kashering a home, like the plastic milk crates are good, because they can sit on it and it can all sort of drain away. So that's the blood that we want to remove. Now, we're allowed to do that on Yom Tov. Now, this is even a filo haya efshel malcham esmo, even if you could have salted it yesterday, before Yom Tov, right? Normally we say whatever you could do for Yom Tov, you have to, right? So why? Because once you salt it, you're going to have to put more salt on it to stop it from spoiling. And that's going to affect the taste. So we don't need to salt it until, even if we could have salted before Yom Tov, we can still salt it on Yom Tov because it keeps it a better taste. Now, now, when we say we can salt it, that's only what we need to use that day. Right? You can't say, I fancy a steak for my Yom Tov lunch. So, let's shecht 150 cows and, run a whole commercial, system over here. Only what you're actually going to use that day you can salt. Now, if you have extra, so now I'm not talking about the example where you shecht 150 cows. That obviously you can't do. But you shechted one cow. Yes.
How do the manufacturers salt so many cows?
Lots of workers. That's, a lot of the big commercial places actually have spray guns. They shoots out salt, makes it a lot quicker rather than do it by hand. There's a video on YouTube somewhere that it's not animals like we have now here, but chickens. There's a video that what's it called? Empire Chicken put out of how their plant works. It's like a advertising, and the whole thing's automated. And so they put, after the shchita, they put the chicken on the hook, and it goes into the water because first you have to soak it for half an hour before you salt it to be able to get any bits of blood or other things that are stuck to it. And the conveyor, it's not a conveyor belt because it's on a hook, but the conveyor system just keeps working, and it's timed that from the time it goes in the water till it goes through this pool out the other side. That's the amount of time it needs to be on in the water. And then it comes along to the place where they salt it, and they've got spray guns, and they help spray inside the chicken to get properly salted on the inside. Right? There's a lot of people when they buy chicken, they buy what they've nicknamed it splits, right? Because it can be difficult to make sure the inside of the chicken, of a whole chicken, can be salted properly. So some people, the chicken should be cut in half before it's salted. That way it can be properly salted. But when they have the spray gun, it's just as good. And a lot of big places have spray guns today. And again, so the whole system then it goes back on, and the amount of time it's meant to be on the salt, meant to have salt on it. That's how long it takes to get to the next pool to the place where now it gets sprayed to wash the salt off, and then goes to another pool, and it's all automated. So the big places, they handle the large quantities, a combination of plenty of workers and automation. That's really so So a lot of these good places, by the way, the kashrus is actually excellent because in these big places, because if you take a chicken off the hook to ask a question, it's not worth putting it back on because there's not another gap. It's just going to slow down the whole system. So they end up having like a big dumpster, right? And they just, anything that has a question, it just goes in the dumpster. And at the end of the day, because they're doing such large quantities, they have a large enough amount they can sell wholesale. And so a lot of the questions that were looked at in the past, and maybe we're going to go leniently in different things, it just all gets sold off wholesale. So one of the improvements of modern day manufacturing. Most issues of modern day manufacturing actually make more problems of kashrus. But when it comes to the actual slaughterhouses, actually has proven the kashrus. So right, so we said if you got extra, so extra doesn't mean that I need 1 cow and I'm going to shecht 150, and I say, oh, I've got some extra, so you have more to sell that night. Extra means, you shecht the cow, but I don't know if you ever seen how big a cow is, but I'm sure you have. There's a lot of meat on one cow, and most of us, for our family, maybe even our neighbors next door, aren't going to eat a whole cow in one day. So you got extra meat there. There's some extra pieces. So what do you do with that? So v'im yesh lo basa yos, you got this extra meat. Well, and you don't want it to spoil. You're worried about it. You can salt it all together, even though there's a lot. It's not even the neighbors; it's just you. So, and 2 adults, 1 kid, and a baby, and it's a whole cow. Right? So you can salt the whole thing as long as you do it all in one shot. So even what you're not going to use today. Because once you're doing 1 batch of salting, it's like 1 lot of work. However, meat that's already been salted, the blood's been removed. And also fish that could have been salted before Yontiv. You can't salt it on Yontiv. So you might be wondering, why would you want to salt the meat again or the fish again? This again is to preserve it. Salting for preservation. Or you want to make beef jerky. Besides salting to the extreme to make like a jerky or salted fish that keeps, just to keep it another day or so with a little less salt. Okay. Chav Gimel 23. Little more practical now for us. That nowadays we don't need the shech refrigeration, but we're baking a pastry on Shabbos, on Yontiv. Shabbos, can't do it on Shabbos. On Yontiv, we're baking pastry. Now, osalasois by suyurim aliyad fus or biyad. Lasis men isa ez surim ka'ifis gedoim. You can't shape it into shapes, either with a mold or by hand. So we can't use cookie cutters and different things like that on Yontif. Right. So Yontif, pictures that are permanent is also part of writing. Right. So it doesn't have to actually be 1 second. So it doesn't actually have to be writing a letter, even forming a picture. And so making it with a like a cookie cutter is a rabbinic issue with that. And the cookie can last weeks. It's like it can be considered permanent. I mean, not my house cookie wouldn't last weeks, but in some places it can. David, yes.
Yeah, I'm wondering, why are we talking about fish? Because it's all lumped into the idea of koshering to
salting.
get the blood out of.
Yeah.
Right, but it's salting to remove the blood. Why is fish included in
right,
that?
because then we said if we wanted a salt meat that's already been salted, in other words, to preserve it. And the same with fish, because to preserve it. That's why we mentioned it. So the salting for kashering in order to be able to eat on Yom Tov were allowed, but the salting for preservation were not allowed, whether it's meat or fish.
But isn't that what's happening? You're salting for preservation. You're not salting the fish to remove the blood.
That's right. That's why you can't do it. So we said, so we mentioned by the meat 2 types of salting. We said salting to remove the blood, that we're allowed to do. Then we said, but meat that's been salted from its blood, we can't salt again. And then once it mentioned that, you also can't salt fish, because salting the fish is the same purpose as the second salting of that meat. All right. 24. Now, the next one we're going to speak about is we have a malacha of, like, when you're skinning, when you're making the hide to make it into leather or something, you've got to scrape off, the hair, and there's little bits of fat and little bits. You got to scrape it to smooth it. So that is a malacha on Shabbos. Now, sometimes this can also be an issue on Yom Tov. So we'll see what's happening. So number 24. You can't smear or smooth off or level off things on Yom Tov, just like you can't on Shabbos. And therefore, also the chamim ner sheshayva or shel chaylev, dak b'menorah b'koisel. You can't like melt the end of a candle or the tallow to put into the candlestick. So sometimes when you set up candles before Shabbos Yom Tov, or when the kids use the candles use candles for menorah, you melt the bottom, and that's what holds it in its place. But we can't do that on Shabbos Yom Tov. Shema yoreach, because you might smear it, which makes a smooth end. Now, if the socket is full of the candlestick, so you got where you actually put the candle into, that's full of, they're using example of tallow of fats, what people used to use, right? Because they had to have lighting for the home, and it was cheap because it was the waste product from the meat. So you can clean it out. So you can't melt it to take it out, because that's going to have the same issue. But you can take something that's not muksa and sort of pull it out. Right. So this, by the way, is a similar issue. Second day Yom Tov, if you're using the same candle, the same. I don't know if anyone use the neranim, like this little the like candle things that go into like a glass container, and it looks like candle. When you light it, it melts, becomes a liquid, and they got a little metal piece in the bottom that's connected to the wick. So you can't pull those out on Yom Tov to clean it out. Just got to put the new candle on top. It's this same idea for yourselves. Chaf Hey, number 25. We can't extinguish fire on Yom Tov, right? So we can light, as we said, from an existing light. Of course, we can light because that's a malacha for cooking. But extinguishing, we cooked it already. So it's not. It doesn't help our cooking. So what do we do? But filo ligram kiboy. Now, even to cause. So in other words, indirectly to make it extinguish, also you can't do, right? Of course, just to point out, a life-threatening situation, we can put out candles. But what we're talking about here, where you can't extinguish, let's say the food's going to burn if you leave it there. Right? So you can't put it out. Can't even do it indirectly. And therefore, you can't deliberately or purposefully place a burning candle in a place where the wind's going to blow it out. Now this is even even though right now there's no wind blowing. So you can't put the candles right at the front door, for an example. Because if you place it there on Yom Tov, as soon as someone opens the door, it's going to blow out. Now they didn't directly put out the fire. You're not directly putting out the fire, but just the fact you put it in such a situation where it's likely to happen, that is a problem. So we can't do that. Likewise, we can't open the door, open a window if there is a candle there already. And pay. Sif base, it's like we learned in the laws of Shabbos over there. Okay. Yes, David.
So when you do shvuch on Pesach, that's exactly what you're doing. You're taking a lit candle to the front door. So it could be a difficulty, I think.
Could be. So it depends how you hold it. Really. I mean, to the side a little bit, at least initially. So you want to be careful of it. It's something you have to be careful of. Yep. All right. So Chafvav 26. Now, now you can cover a fire with a vessel or ashes that have been prepared before Yom Tov. Now, when we cover with a vessel, means like the old-fashioned lamps. They used to have inside a glass. And it was to preserve it, not to extinguish it. Now, Mikol Mokim, nevertheless, Kivin She'en Mekaben L'Chiboy, even though it might dim a little bit, right? Because if you have one of these lamps and the glass lamps and you close it, there's a little less air and the flame may dim a little bit. That's not a problem because it's not your intention to extinguish it. Your intention is to preserve it. So so therefore, it's a malacha that's not needed for its purpose. Yeah, Ben.
How can Ether resolve it? Ether would put it out. And how can you have Ether Muchan? It means you intend to use it.
That's a good question. I don't know how it works.
Okay.
Because, we don't really have, none of us really use candles like that.
Maybe cover it a little, not completely.
So it means, it's talking about ashes from wood.
Yeah.
But what if it happened by accident? What should you do?
Oh, it happens. All happens. Anything happened by accident. What can you do? It's done. And we try to be more careful next time. If it was a little bit of, if we could have avoided it, but otherwise, no one should beat themselves up over mistakes, and definitely not mistakes that were accident.
Okay, but you need to lighten up again.
So if you need to relight it, so then we need to light from existing flame. So if we have an existing flame, another one, so we do it from there. Otherwise, this is where we go hunting for our local non-Jew to help us out. It's,
Okay, thank you.
Or a Jewish neighbor that has an existing.
Oh, right. Oh, right. Or one that has it. Yeah, that's easier. It's easier to explain. I always wonder what people think. Excuse me, it's my festival, and I'm not allowed to light off. Could you light this match for me? Most people don't seem to mind, but
Right.
I'm sure they come home and said, I just met this weirdest guy last night on my way home. But, Baruch Hashem, we've done it plenty of times. Plenty of times. Okay. So the ashes, again, I don't know how it doesn't put it out. It's talking about hot wood ashes. I don't know.
Okay.
Somehow that preserves it. We don't really use lamps that way anymore. So I guess I don't know. Yeah, sorry. You want to ask something?
Rabbi Laser Lawrence of London says, be careful who you ask to be that non-Jew, because he's researching the genealogy of people who may have lost track of whether they're Jewish or not.
That's right. There's more than one story of someone who was very helpful to a Jewish couple or a Jewish family. And they thanked him so much. And he says, it was my pleasure to help. My grandmother was Jewish. And they go, which one? My mother's mother. So, it's happened. People say, it's one of those stories, and all the people involved aren't alive anymore. So there's no way to know whether it's true. But they tell that story about Elvis Presley. So he was the Shabbos guy for the rabbi in his community for quite a few years. And he's one of the people they tell that story about. They asked, one time they thanked him. They asked him why was he always so willing to help. And he said because his grandmother was Jewish. So, I don't know whether people just tell the story they want Elvis to be Jewish or not to be. I don't know, but that's one of the stories. Okay.
27.
Yes, it was still in the end of 26. So now, when we cover the fire to preserve it, this is when it is for the need of the day. All right. But for the nighttime, you can't do it. Because that night belongs to second day Yom Tov. Because, of course, the Jewish day starts with the night. All right. 27. We can't kasher utensils on Yom Tov. Right? So, we've got a few things here. So first, just to give a bit of background about the kashering. So what happens is when let's just keep it simple. We're talking about a metal pot. So a metal pot that you cook in, the pot absorbs everything as pores to a certain extent, and it absorbs the flavor into the pot. So if non-kosher got cooked in this pot, then it has absorbed the flavor of the pot. Now, the general rule is, however it absorbs the flavor, that's how you take it out. Now, I will point out to you that there are several chapters in the full Shulchan Aruch, not just the abridged version, with many commentaries, all the details of exactly how to kasher. So no one should just take the general rule of how it goes in, that's how you take it out, without having had a lot of experience or guidance from someone. But if we just speak generally without speaking specifically, that's how it happens. So let's say, for an example, you had a baking dish, and it goes in the oven, and the fire is what heats it up. So it has to be kosher with fire. So you have to, blowtorch it or various things. If it's a pot that you say make soup in it, so it has to be. It came so the taste went in via liquid. So then, although you could blowtorch it because that's an even higher level of koshering, if you blowtorch it properly, you have to really get it hot. Some people have this thing, I think you just wave your magic blowtorch over everything and it becomes kosher. You have to really get it hot. So you have to leave it in one place, for long enough to get it hot enough. But if it came via liquid, let's say like via soup or something, then we can put it into boiling water. So again, handles and plastic handles and earthenware and glass and all these things, there's lots of complications. If something's one piece, like certain utensils have parts screwed on, let's leave all the details aside. But that's the concept behind it. Now, we can't do that on Yom Tov. Why? Because let's say we're going to boil the water to kosher the pot. Although we are allowed to boil water for food, right? But let's go back a step. That in concept, whatever is forbidden on Shabbos is forbidden on Yom Tov. And there's exception for preparation for food. So preparation for food, now we can boil water, which you can't do on Shabbos, because you want to have coffee, let's say, or soup. You want to have food, so you're allowed to do that. Now, even though we said something that's allowed for cooking is allowed for other Yom Tov purposes, but that's if it's directly for Yom Tov purposes. So, for example, I'm allowed to carry food in a place with no Erev, so therefore I can carry my machzor, or my lulav and esrog, or my shofar, because it's a direct need of Yom Tov. But boiling water for koshering is not a direct need for Yom Tov. Yom Tov doesn't need the koshering. You don't. That's your pot. Well, kosher before Yom Tov. Borrow a pot. Use a different pot. Right? It's not directly a need of Yom Tov. It's a step before that. So we can't boil up the water for koshering. Likewise, whatever we're going to use for koshering with fire, either by making a very hot fire or turning on the blowtorch, which is the easiest way to do it nowadays. Lighting that fire is again not for Yom Tov purpose, it's for the koshering. So we can't do that on Yom Tov. Okay. Now, din tevilas kalim, ayin la'il sif, soif simon lamed zayin. So it tells us to go look earlier. All right. So we just to give a little rundown on that. Let's go back a step again. Give what do we need to do? We have the concept of toveling kalim. It's not kashrus. In other words, it doesn't change the kashrus of the item. You can have food that is cooked in something that wasn't toveled, and it can be kosher. And you could have a utensil that is non-kosher, and toveling in the mikveh, dunking in the mikveh doesn't help. So what is the purpose of putting in the mikveh? It's spiritually to take it out from the status, the tumah of the non-Jew into the spiritual status of a Jew. That's the purpose of toveling. Now, we're not allowed to use a utensil that hasn't been toveled. So again, so after the fact, someone else made something, it's not necessarily a problem, but we can't use one. So if we end up with, let's say we have this bowl and we want to use it, so we really should have toveled it before Yom Tov. There are leniencies on Yom Tov, not Shabbos, but there are leniencies on Yom Tov if we really get stuck. But again, it's the type of thing, I guess, just be aware of the concept, and you ask your rabbi because it depends on the circumstances. Every
Rabbi?
case is going. Yes.
If you have a riparian area, you can also table it in the riparian area where there's water, flowing water, isn't there?
Yeah, you could if you're, in the ocean.
You let
I got to tell you that every time I tabled a whole bunch of stuff on the beach, I always lost something. Always lost something. But but you could.
You release it for a few, how many seconds in the water?
Just for a moment, and that's when it gets lost. But no, you really need the best way is with a fishing net, actually. But it's when you go, you put in the fishing net and you sort of
just drop it in.
Yeah.
Right.
Then I haven't lost things. When you do it by hand in the ocean, you've got lots of things to do. It happens. But you could. But again, but we're talking about whether you're allowed to do it on Yom Tov. Just to mention, so we spoke about the type of the utensils. So if a Jew made it, then there's not an issue because it was formed already in the spiritual domain of a Jew. If a non-Jew made it, but it was a Jew's materials. So let's say, for an example, let's just, on a made-up example, you have a Jewish factory, Jewish-owned, and they make Kiddush cups. And some of the workers aren't Jewish. So, but the fact that the materials belong to a Jew, or the other way around, if you had a non-Jewish company that made silver goblets, and it was a Jew who was making them, so either of those are sufficient that you don't need to toivel it. You don't need to immerse it in the mikveh. But if something came totally from a non-Jew, then we need to do that. Just we have to do it before Yom Tov. That's all. Chavtes 29. Now, you can't make a fire just to heat the house. Except, right? There's an exception. If it's so cold that the food congeals, right? So your house is cold to the point where, you can imagine an Eastern European winter, your steak very soon becomes steaksicle. It's
Rabbi, did you do 28?
No. Thank you for catching me on that. Well, let's finish 29. Let's go back to 28. Thank you. So, if the food is going to congeal or go, in other words, the cold is going to affect the food. Then you're heating the house not for your comfort, but for food preparation. And it just so happens after that, it becomes a nice temperature for you. And you're comfortable as well. But it's really for the food. But if it's not that cold, then also you can't heat up just for our own comfort. But you can ask a non-Jew to light the fire, or for us, turn up the heat and various things. And obviously, again, we're not speaking about a place where it's so cold that it's going to be a life-threatening situation. All right, back to 28. Din hadachas kelim b'yontiv. Now, washing dishes on Yontiv. See, I so much want to get out of washing dishes, I didn't even, I just skipped it. It's k'may b'Shabbos. It's the same rule as Shabbos. So for those of you who joined us in Shabbos, will remember, but those who don't, it's like this. We've got a few issues. Just to wash dishes, to have clean dishes, we can't do on Shabbos Yom Tov. But we can wash the dishes if we need it on Yom Tov. So let's say, for example, the first night Yom Tov, I wash my dishes. Sorry, I dirty my dishes, right? I'm using my plates and I'm eating off them. And then comes Yom Tov meal the next day, the lunch. And I've got a limited supply of dishes, and I need more dishes. So I'm allowed to wash them. Now, we'll come back to it in a minute, but I just want to finish. However, you can't wash them on first day Yontiv in order to have them second day Yontiv. So after Yontiv lunch, if the next time you're going to need them is dinner, second night Yontiv, so that night, then we can't wash them. Because that's like doing malacha on Yontiv for after Yontiv. So we need to, which we can't do. So we can claim the same Yontiv. There are a few other issues. Issue number one is sponge and various things. So on Shabbos, we have a big issue with the sponges because you can't squeeze it. Yontiv is less of an issue, but still something to try and avoid. The other question is on Yontiv whether you're allowed to use the hot water from the tap, right? Because really the hot water, you can only use hot water that you heat it up for cooking. Right, so I'll rephrase that. At nighttime, so on Shabbos, we've got an issue with the hot water system. The biggest issue of the hot water system is that as the hot water comes out, new cold water goes in and gets heated up. And if you have the instant hot water, then it's even worse, right? Then you're heating up at that moment. And of course, we can't cook, we can't heat up water on Shabbos. On Yontiv, at night, it's usually not an issue because the water that was in your hot water system, in your hot water tank, was probably heated up before Yontiv. It was just kept there. So that's not going to be the issue. The daytime, there's a discussion, amongst the various halachic authorities about whether you're allowed to use water that was heated up on Yontiv. They'll say at the end of the day, it's not for cooking. They'll say that you could have used it for cooking. You could use hot water if you wanted to. There's who to rely on if you're lenient, but I don't want to tell people give a blanket leniency. All right. Lamed, number 30. Now we're going to speak about heating up water for washing. So let's look at this one. You're allowed to heat up water to wash your hands, but not your entire body. Right. So we have here, when we spoke about the 9 days, different things. We said that you can wash your face, hands, and feet. Right. And face, hands, and feet. Well, the face we understand is out. Right? Hands also normally includes like armpits and the various things, and feet includes like the groin area and various things. And another leniency on top of that is that's because that's what everyone does, right? Because remember, one of the things that we said that once something's permitted for food preparation, if it's something that everyone needs on Yontiv, then you can do it on Yontiv. So washing hands, face, and feet is something that in those days, everyone did at least that. So that's what you could do. So the question when it comes to showers and things today, nowadays people pretty much shower every day. It's become the norm, and particularly if you have 2 days Yontiv. Particularly if it's 2 days Yontiv, either followed by Shabbos or following a Shabbos, it's a relatively normal thing for people to wash within those 3 days. So many authorities are lenient on second day Yontiv, but not to wash the whole body at once. Right? We have an issue washing the whole body, but if you're in a shower, to stand outside the shower using this water, and you sort of using soap is also problematic. But let's say like a body wash, not a solid soap. You put in your face and your head, whatever. Then stick your head in the water, wash it off. Then your armpits, just put that in the water. And just wash your body bit by bit, and never wash the entire body at once. All right. So that's there are many people who permit that. Not everyone is going to. But certainly, if you wash like that second day Yom Tov, you have who to rely on. Using the hot water. Now, tzarich tinok. Now, to bathe a child, im tzrichim l'chatzoi. So, because you need to wash him. Also, gam ken l'chamim mayim b'shviloi. Now, you can't heat up the water, especially for the child. Even through a non-Jew. So in other words, we can't specifically heat up water for bathing, because here we're going to bathe the entire child. But today, again, our hot water system working automatically. We don't need to heat it up; it's already there. So, but if you're heating up for food, you can heat up a little bit extra. So let's say, for your coffee, you only need half a pot of water. So now you can put in 3/4 of a pot, and now you've got hot water to mix in, to wash the baby. You only need a little bit for cooking. You can even fill up a large kettle in order to the only condition is whatever you're heating up has to all be in the kettle before you put on the fire. You can't put on the fire then add to it. It has to be in there first. So in other words, when you put on the fire, it makes no difference that you put on extra. And again, this is our same idea that we have today with the hot water system. It's going automatically. So it's not the issue. And we shouldn't add more water once it's already on the fire. So that's if the child's healthy. So we heat up water indirectly. So today, if we're making a bath for the child, we're just taking water out of the hot water system. But if we had open fires, cooking on the fireplace and things, so we cook extra than our food, and then you mix that hot water with some cold water, obviously, to make it the right temperature. That's a healthy child. If God forbid the child's a little bit unwell, we're even saying a little bit unwell. It doesn't have to be bedridden or seriously ill. Just not so great, not perfectly healthy. Then we're allowed to have a non-Jew heat up the water, and there's no problem. So, any questions on that, on the bathing or the washing? No? Okay. Lamed Aleph, 31. So, you can't make a fire, from a flintstone or a glass, or from matches, right? So this is where the halacha was. We mentioned it earlier, just in discussion, because we said that you could light a fire. So we pointed out that it has to be from existing fire, but here's the actual halacha. Right, so we can't create a new fire through flintstones, through matches and various things. We have to have a fire from before Yom Tov. Okay. Lamed base 32. Ein oisen mugmar. We can't make a mugmar. Now he's going to define what that means. So this mugmar, I guess it's a tool we don't really have today, because I've never seen anything like it. Well, truth is, that doesn't mean anything. Maybe everyone else has one, and I'm just whatever. But this mugmar is the hain lefazim b'samim al gecholim. It's a device that scatters spices over coals, right? And the reason that you do this is to sort of perfume the house, or you have it your clothes hanging up, right? It's like people essentially like burning incense or something, not for meditation or those various things, but just like as a air freshener, right? See, we can't do that. We can't put these spices or whatever various things on hot coals on Yom Tov. Now, even though you're allowed to cook, but this is not cooking for food. So, bein the riach, bein the games, abayis, kalim. This is, you can't do this not for its fragrance, just for you to enjoy the smell, or to perfume the house or clothing. Why? Tichsib, it says, l'chol nefesh. Something that's for everyone. So, needs to be, any cooking we're allowed to do on Yom Tov has to be something that everyone needs. But this mugmar, this putting spice, herbs on the coals, this is only people who are, very dainty, or the people who just really want to enjoy themselves. They're very indulgent. Now, titun, sorry. Now, smoking tobacco, right? Now, I just want to point out, before we say smoking tobacco, we're not talking about cigarettes now, because cigarettes were invented. We're talking about smoking a pipe. We'll come to cigarettes and cigars things shortly. So just smoking a pipe. Our sages have a dispute about whether it's something that that everyone needs. Right, so now even those who are lenient and allow you to smoke the pipe, you have to be careful not to light the pipe with a piece of paper or coal. Why? When you throw them onto the ground, you're going to extinguish them. So you have to be very careful how you light it. But came by Yom Tov, and it's easy to make the mistake of doing this in Yom Tov, because that's how you do it all the time during the weekday. So if you're going to just do it in the regular way, out of habit, you're just going to throw the thing down. And we've got an additional problem. If on the paper that you use, you put an existing flame and then use that to light your pipe, there were words or pictures, then you also have the malacha of erasing, because you burnt the paper up. So you have to light it from a pre-existing flame, actually directly from the flame. And also you can't use a brand new pipe, right? Because when you use it the first time, that gives it a, like it sort of forms it properly, finishes off making it. Also, you can't grind the tobacco on Yom Tov. So that's all a pipe. Now, it also seems that you're not allowed to cut the tips off cigars on Yom Tov, he says, to open its end. So you could bite off the end, which is not very tasty, but you could do that. Or you could burn it, but you can't, you can't bite it. Can't bite it or burn it, because when you do this, it's like creating, it wasn't a fully made cigar, and by cutting or biting or burning off the end, that's turning it into a vessel. So we can't do that on Yom Tov. Now, cigarettes have several other problems. Now, I'm not discussing now whether it's people should be smoking cigarettes or not, right? That's its own discussion. But I'm just talking about now the issue of on Yom Tov. With cigarettes, the problem is the same way that we said that you can't light with the paper, different things, because what you normally do is throw it out. So with a cigarette, the normal thing to do is at a certain point you just put it, you press it down and put it out. And this is problematic. So although it seems to be people have taken it as a blanket allowance that they can use cigarettes on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, sorry, Chas on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, it's actually quite problematic, cigarettes. And the pipes, there's plenty of lenient opinions. To smoke a pipe on Yom Tov. All right, any questions?
I saw somebody smoke a pipe on Shabbos.
Well, Shabbos you can't do. We can't light. Yeah. Shabbos is.
Just going back a little
Yeah.
to the way of cleaning or washing. Is it allowed to use sanitizers? Like, we did it all the time during the COVID, or
on your hands?
Hands.
Yeah. Use that.
Yeah, this is okay. And wipes on a child, it's not a problem also. Is it right?
Yes.
Wipes instead of washing.
Oh, wipes? Okay, now that's another can of worms. Yom Tov, not so much. Shabbos, it depends what type of wipes. Right? There's ones that have moisture more on the surface, and they're okay. And then there's ones that the moisture comes out as you apply pressure. So that's squeezing. So that becomes problematic. Shabbos. That's going to depend which type of wipe. Sorry?
But sanitizers are out.
Yeah, sanitizer is fine. Sanitizer is fine.
Thank you.
Okay, so yeah. Sorry, Ben? Sorry, say again?
The wipes are like smearing something. It's like limroach.
Not really. It's not really. I mean, that's not the intention when one's wiping. So it's covered abrius. We want to, the dignity of the human and different things. So that's not the issue. The issue is the squeezing. People like to say it's permitted because you don't really need the liquid, but that's not really true, because that's why you use wipes and not a tissue, right? But it depends on the type. You have ones that you have to actually squeeze it out, and you have ones that. So if you take a wipe and you touch it, and you actually get wet fingers just from touching it, and you could put wet on something else, then those ones are okay, because it's on the surface. But if it's in the wipe, then it's problematic. Okay, so I might see you tomorrow. I don't know. Rabbi Smith thinks it's traveling back, and so we'll see how it goes. But if everything runs on schedule, as we know planes do nowadays, sometimes, then you'll see Rabbi Smith tomorrow. And if you see me, then he's still in transit.
Oh, we are to find this both ways. Believe me, it's a knowledge that's what matters.
That's it. So I'll wish you a wonderful week and a good Shabbos, just in case.
Rabbi, can I ask a quick question that's not related? We were having a discussion when a person's taking medicine and he's saying the prayer before taking medicine, the Yehi Ratzon. Is it 4 words of Yehi Ratzon Shiyeh L'Refuah, or is there an extra Li in there?
Yehi Ratzon Shiyeh Li L'Refuah. It's 5 words.
Okay.
So it should be Hashem's will that this should be a healing for me.
But you don't need a Zeh in there.
Yeah, I mean, you could. I guess it's not going to ruin it. It still makes sense.
Because there was a question whether there was a Li in there or not.
Yeah, so we say Li. Yeah, Shia Li L'Refuah.
Okay, thank you.
No problems.
Thanks for everything. Good
All right.
Shabbos.
Have a great week, everyone.
Have a good day. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank
Pleasure.
you.